My name's Kevin Rabichow. I go by Bearwire, and I'm an elite pro for Run It Once. I think I first played poker with friends in 2005, more so in 2006. I had a poker table in my basement, a few friends in high school who were really into it, and we would play for pennies, like maybe $2 tournaments. For some reason, I tracked my results over the last summer, and I was doing well, and I don't know if I must have already thought that I was interested in pursuing this. So as soon as I got into university, I dove right into it. I was playing every day, all my free time. I went to University of Chicago for economics, ended up doing a minor in statistics as well. I think the plan was to work in finance, or I did briefly look into trading. Just no jobs really formulated that could compete with poker by the time I was done. But I did pay for most of my expenses through poker. When I graduated in 2011, I was fully independent and paying for everything with poker. And that continues until today. I definitely questioned the long-term success that I could have in poker after my first World Series of Poker. That was the same year as Black Friday in 2011, so I had already taken a substantial financial hit from losing my full tilt balance, losing my absolute poker balance. And then in that summer, I went like 0 for 17 in World Series events. So I was just destroyed financially. And I had to come back from that having basically just decided to be a pro poker player and move to Toronto and somehow make enough money to sustain myself. But I would say by then, because I had such a strong poker network, I was fortunately able to just have support of like friends, not only financially because I was staked at the time, but having the support of friends who are succeeding and knowing that other people who kind of thought the same way and were playing the same games were having success. That gives you that motivation to say, you know, it's just a rough patch. As long as I keep working hard, it's gonna be all right. And it worked out, I would say, within a year that situation rectified. Before Black Friday, I was playing heads up around 5-10, taking shots at 10-20 no limit, which at the time felt crazy. It was a huge amount of success, I would say, for myself. But after Black Friday, after World Series, I had to play 50 NL, 100 NL. I had dropped down to 10% of the stakes. And I was being backed for bigger games so that I could just continue to play. So really what I needed was to win for the next year. If I hadn't, like, had I hit another big downswing after then, I would have been pretty deep in the hole in makeup, and I'm not sure that I would have been able to afford to stay in Canada. It's funny, on Black Friday in April of 2011, I was with my roommate at the time, David. We were picking out an apartment to live in Chicago while he went to medical school and I played poker professionally off a laptop. And I got a call from my friend who said, hey, did you know the sky is falling? You should probably check your computer. And I stepped out of the meeting where we were planning to sign a lease and found out that I no longer had a job in the US. So I did not rent an apartment with David, unfortunately. But 3 months later, I moved to Toronto and been a permanent resident of Canada for 3 years, and I don't intend on going back at this point. So basically, Black Friday pushed me to be a Canadian. I first started coaching for Run It Once in early 2014, and I've been making specifically heads up no limit videos for the 4 years since. Run It Once in particular was appealing to me because I used to be a really big user of 2+2 forums, pretty much from when I started in 2006, 2007, up until maybe 2012 or 2013. But by then, the forums were not active at all. Strategy discussion was very private, and Run It Once was somehow a place where that kind of information wasn't protected. There were really good coaches who were making videos. There were really smart players who were sharing ideas on the forum. So to me, it was just like a place that I could work where I felt like the community that I wanted was still there. I take a lot of interest in helping students and working individually with people. Videos have this kind of convenience to them that I like, that I can help a lot of people who I've never met, or help a lot of people who are only going to meet me because of those videos. And I think that because Run It Once has that active community where when I post a video, I get comments on it or I get feedback on it, what I'm able to learn from the production process is the feedback that I get, even if it's not extremely specific, lets me know what other players are thinking about, what kind of strategy they're most interested in, or what kind of strategy, where the gaps are in their strategy. It helps me a lot to understand where the population is at right now, or where the population was at 6 months ago. So being part of that community, getting that constant feedback from videos, it really helps. Yeah, it helps me determine my strategy, for sure. I specialize in Heads Up No Limit, which has been my main game for, I want to say 9 years. I had a friend, Dan, who I went to university with, who when I was playing like small stakes 6-max, small sit and goes, he started playing Heads Up No Limit, just like 50 NL or 100 NL. I think the smallest games on full tilt at the time, but I saw what he was doing as just like really cool, making a lot of money. We talked a lot about strategy because he was one of my close poker friends at the time. So eventually I got into it and really never stopped playing that format. I think my playing style is straightforward and solid. I try to create a base for play that's rooted in game theory, that's mostly not easy to exploit. And anything that I deviate from there is very, very conscious, like for a good reason. Otherwise, I'm pretty much trying to be patient and stick to the plan and play what I think is really solid poker. Something I've always found that I was good at when playing poker, I've become very in tune with the way people think about how they're playing. This strength mostly comes from being so involved in forums and from talking to so many people about poker strategy. So when I'm in the middle of a match or in the middle of any session, as long as my focus is there, I feel really good about my ability to see the entire game from their point of view and think, essentially match the way that they're thinking so that I know how to counter it, how to play against it. I'd say my greatest weakness when playing poker is not really stepping outside the box very often. And I know that's weird for a heads up player because so much of what appeals to people about heads up is being flexible, adapting to your opponents, and I certainly do a fair bit of that, but I'd say that the thing I struggle with the most is still finding the confidence to go way outside of standard play or to go way outside the bounds of what I think is kind of normal or theoretically sound. And a lot of times that's the correct thing to do. So I'm constantly trying to push myself to be willing to do more of that, especially in heads up. Some of my biggest wins have actually come in either the Scoop or W Coop heads up events. I've had 3 very deep finishes. The very first one, when I was living in my first apartment in Canada, 2012, I finished 3rd in what I believe was the medium event, but at the time the pools were very big, and that would have been maybe a 50K score, 60K score. More recently, I was playing the high rollers, and twice I finished 3rd in those as well. But I had to run through an insanely tough field of heads up players there, and certainly didn't feel like I deserved to be finishing that high, but I was proud that I could hang with that group. As far as cash games go, which is obviously what I play the most of, some of my biggest wins have come against also some really tough opponents. I had that 5100 session that I was fortunate enough to be recording against Chow Ren, one of the biggest winners, or the biggest online winner of all time. Had a big win against him in that video series, and also playing 2550 against another really strong player in his own right, Philismes, not sure how to pronounce that, but I got 50 or 60K off of him in one session. And I mean, I play big games like that quite often, but it's just, it's not common, especially these days, to play in a game like that and have it be easy and have a lot of money come your way. So to win that amount against someone that I respect is pretty, I'm pretty proud of. My biggest winning day was actually at the beginning of this year. I finished third in the Poker Stars Winter Series main event for 140K. Sometime last year, my lifetime cash winnings surpassed $1 million US, which for me is kind of, as like a grinder who doesn't take a whole lot of risks, is certainly my biggest financial achievement to date. Definitely my favorite thing to use my winnings on is to eat out. I go to nice restaurants whenever I can, especially when I'm traveling to new cities. I'll play in Montreal, if I'm ever in New York City, if I'm going to Aussie Millions, for example. There's so many great restaurants, and that's for sure where I've spent more than on anything else. Certainly the most irresponsible financial purchase that came from poker was that when I moved to Vegas and was literally trying poker professionally for the first time, I drove home in a new Acura that I had purchased like at the worst rates that you could possibly get from a car dealership, because I was so convinced that I wanted to drive home in a new car and did not seek approval from my parents before doing so. So that was a big purchase that I probably should not have made, but it worked out. The poker lifestyle for me is all about freedom for when I'm going to work, freedom to spend my time the way that I most enjoy it. So when I really feel like I could be productive right now, there's always a game that I could play. There's always work that I could get done. You don't really get that working for a company or in an office. When you feel your best, you can work right that moment. So what's really great to me about poker is that there's always a chance for you to put in the highest quality hours that you possibly can. There's a couple things that I really struggle with in the poker lifestyle. One, of course, is when you are losing, it's difficult to get into the mindset that you want to, not only do you want to put the hours in, but that you're going to put the hours in with good quality play. I've always found that really difficult, and oftentimes my solution is to play less or to play smaller, and that means reducing your income. So there's kind of this catch-22 about dealing with downswings that there's really, in my experience, no great answer to. It's just something that eventually passes. But I've always found it really hard to be motivated to work as well as you possibly can when you're really getting a beat down. The other thing that's tricky about the poker lifestyle is that combination of being isolated but also having freedom, I guess. It's a double-edged sword a little bit to say that you can play whenever you want, but then also be the only person responsible for your own success. So I think that's something like being part of a team or being part of a community is something that fights against that a little bit, but whenever I don't have that, I'm kind of drawn towards other opportunities, other environments where that kind of team environment is more pronounced, like more obvious. Two things I've been spending a lot of my time on outside of poker the last few years. One is cooking school or the culinary arts. The other one is Ultimate Frisbee. I've been playing in an amateur league for the past 6 or 7 years, and I've been coaching it as well for the last 3 years. For anyone who's not familiar, Ultimate Frisbee is a field sport played mostly in the manner of soccer. We play on a soccer pitch, and there's only stoppages when a score happens or when a foul occurs or something like that. It grabs some rules from other sports like basketball. You have to set a pivot, you can't run with the disc, or like American football, you score by receiving a pass in the end zone. But generally speaking, it's 7-on-7, full field sport, played to 15 or 17, or some kind of time cap. Ultimate was sort of my way of meeting people when I moved to Toronto. I guess I was joining a few different amateur sports clubs to meet people, but Frisbee was kind of the one that stuck for me. So as I got a little more competitive, I just got really involved in that community and stopped playing the other sports so much. And that's still today like how probably 90% of the people I know in Toronto, as well as my current girlfriend, I met all of them through playing Frisbee. Right now in the indoor season, I play 3 nights a week of Frisbee. In the summer, it might be a bit less often per week, but I would play a lot of weekends, travel for tournaments, maybe 2 weekends per month. There's a lot of things about Ultimate that I enjoy. I'm not the most amazing athlete, but I think it's very accessible for someone like me. There's a lot of skills in Ultimate that don't demand that everyone on the field have the same kind of athletic ability. There's positions for tall people, there's positions for fast people, there's positions for kind of smart, almost like quarterbacking type skills from football. So I think that appeals to me mainly because it just suits my skill set to some extent. What happened when I started taking Ultimate seriously, which is the same thing that happened when I started taking poker seriously, was that I went down the path of learning strategy and got very involved in strategy and pretty quickly transitioned towards a coaching role. And that's been kind of like a fun project that I think coaching poker definitely had a hand in like preparing me for that mindset. Go! The biggest difference or the biggest challenge when I started coaching Ultimate was the group dynamic. So whenever I coach poker, it still mostly operates as a kind of passive learning environment where I'm instructing either one person or a small group of people on a specific thing, and they're just receiving that. When I started working with Ultimate players, there's kind of a back and forth that continues to happen. You're not only coaching one person's skills, but you're also coaching the team's chemistry, the team's involvement in the practice, the team's performance on the field together, but also their individual skills. So kind of balancing the different dynamics that exist in a team sport has been very different for me, and it's been the most fun challenge for sure. I know that my offensive strategy in Ultimate is a lot stronger than my defensive. The offense is usually broken up into a group of handlers and a group of cutters. Usually handlers are the players responsible for throwing to the cutters. The cutters are mostly going to get to score goals. And I think some of the more underutilized offensive strategies involve handler movement. A lot of what I try and teach is getting handlers to follow their passes, essentially like being the next cut after that. It's really easy for offensive strategy to get lost in this idea of a handler holds the disc, waits for a cutter to get open, and then throws to that cutter. So it's common for people to overlook the dangerous elements that a handler can introduce when they're good with their legs, when they're really active on the field. I feel really good about what I've achieved as a coach in Frisbee. Certainly, I love playing the sport, and I have a lot of fun whenever I get to be on the field, but I think that I get a lot of joy out of coaching teams, and the team that I've worked with the most over the summers has continued to improve quite a lot since I started coaching with them. I think that's the work I do with them is probably what I'm most proud of. 1, 2, 3, 4. Starting in September of 2018, I've been working for Paintbox Catering and Bistro on the catering side. I've actually kind of surprised myself with how much I've been able to accomplish working the last few months in food. We've done events for 300 people. We've done holiday orders for a heck of a lot more than that, actually. And there's just been like a big variety of different types of services, events, parties that we've either hosted or sent food to. And the menu is completely different every time. So I'm really happy with how quickly I was able to adapt to those jobs, and the product that we were putting out. It's always good. I think when I first started taking food really seriously was the year that I first went to the World Series of Poker. I stayed with a lot of guys in Vegas who were really interested in going out to eat, and there's a lot of great food in Vegas, so kind of depending on whether it was a good or bad day, we were either going out for a celebratory steak dinner or we were just free early because we busted at 3 p.m. and we needed something to do, so we would also go out. So there's so many like high-end restaurants that I was able to try in such a short period of time that when I moved to Toronto, I kind of kept that interest going. I was more interested in like learning how to cook stuff at home at a higher level, and now, like for the past 4 years, I've been living quite close to George Brown College, so I picked up a few part-time classes in 2015, switched to full-time by last year, and I just graduated a couple weeks ago from the culinary management program there. When I think about earlier influence of cooking, my mom was always the cook at home. I mean, my dad would grill sometimes, but she definitely laid the groundwork for kind of an interest in home cooking specifically. And now that I'm in culinary school, or finished with culinary school now, we've kind of talked more recipes with my mom, talked more about restaurants with her. It's definitely been something we reconnected over. Something I like about cooking that's very different than playing poker, where you know, strategies are kind of theoretical, the things you're doing are kind of theoretical, and a lot of times it doesn't work out and you just have to kind of know whether or not you were playing well or making good decisions. In cooking, it's kind of clear when you've gone wrong or when things have gone right, which is kind of, it's refreshing in a way, it's also challenging in a different way. So I think that that's something that keeps me drawn to new recipes or like trying new techniques in cooking is that kind of definite product that you get at the end. I think because their cooking and poker are so different, it's definitely makes for a nice break, or if I had like a long session or if I've had a long day, it's something extremely different that I can use to take my mind off of poker and kind of refresh in that way. Now with poker, I'm in an interesting situation because it's almost become my second job, but I'm finding myself exploring new games, kind of interested in new formats. I think a little bit of time away from poker has made me kind of freshly interested in, you know, learning how to play live tournaments better or learning how to play PLO better. And those are things that are interesting, I guess, for the second time or all over again for the first time, however you want to say that. I don't see myself quitting poker completely at any point in time. Going to the World Series is something that not only do I think is really valuable, but I also think it's really fun to have a trip to make every year that's like 20% business and 80% pleasure. Probably the best time that I've had still in my poker career was that first year that I went to the World Series. Even though I went 0 for 17, I lived in what was effectively a mansion for 6 weeks with 14 other poker players. Some of my best poker friends still were living there, Bjorn and Rob and Alex and Maxwell, all people who are now just playing live poker, so screen name's not necessary, but the whole experience of being in that house was kind of like the epitome of poker lifestyle in the World Series, and I'm certainly not going to top that. I probably won't have that experience again, and I'm gonna remember that one for the rest of my life, that's for sure. I know it sounds like a silly answer, but scrambled eggs, I think, are my favorite thing to cook. not only just because I like eating them, but also it's something that I've been able to practice a lot because I make it almost every morning.
Ta-da.
And I wouldn't say that I know the secret, but I know that I like scrambled eggs that are not overcooked and made with plenty of butter.